I want to join the mercenaries.
There's no place for wimps around here.
I am strong enough.
Nonsense, you couldn't even lift a decent sword like mine.
I said I am strong enough.
Oh, you're killing me. Want to risk a little bet?
I bet I can handle your sword.
All right, let's see how strong you are.
About this
Put
strong.
down that weapon!
Looks like you got me there.
That weapon!
Well, I guess I just lost 30 gold pieces. Here you are.
Listen to him talk.
Greetings everyone, I am Archonokvals, and welcome to the temple. Today we'll... Wait a minute, you already covered the lessons from Gothic 1 in your first video. Isn't Gothic 2 basically Gothic 1 but slightly tweaked? Are you seriously getting lazy after only one video? You're right, Bromore, however there's more to Gothic 2 than meets the eye. If my first video was about the foundational lessons from Gothic 1, then this video would be on how to further build upon those lessons. There's no shortage of disappointing sequels in all forms of entertainment. So I believe there are lessons from Gothic 2 on how to make a proper sequel. Lessons that creators can emulate and the audience can appreciate. As with the last time, if you stick to the end of the video, you'll be a more knowledgeable creator or a schmata, better viewer. So without further interruption, let us begin. But first, a word from our sponsor.
I am Bromo, this is my house and these are my girls. I like my girls. And if you like my girls too, then you'll pay for it, 50 gold pieces.
While all the other prisoners escaped, he remained behind in the rubble. Now it is I who brings him back from there. He is weak and has forgotten much. But he is alive. He's back.
So, as a result of your efforts in the first game, the magic barrier, the defining plot element of Gothic 1, has been destroyed. As mentioned in the intro, while everyone escaped, you quite literally remained behind in the rubble. Thankfully, your mage ally from the first game, Zardas, had your back. Eventually. It appears that due to old age, Zardas had his priorities switched. After 3 weeks of intense chiropractics, Zardas finally teleports you out of the colony, and you emerge as a new and free man. However, new does not necessarily mean better. Thanks to the magical ore armor you wore in the final battle, you managed to survive being buried alive for 3 weeks. What didn't survive, however, is your entire set of skills that you learned in the colony. Although atrophied and malnourished, you take solace in the fact that you are now a free man, and the threats you fought against have been vanquished. Until Zarda starts dropping black pills. While it's great that you freed yourself and your allies from the confines of the barrier, you also freed some of the worst scum of the realm, who are now actively terrorizing the countryside of the island of Khorinis. But that's not all. Zardas informs you that the great evil you defeated in the first game, before leaving this world, called forth all of its dark minions. The most powerful of these minions are, of course, the ancient dragons who've taken up residence in the old Valley of Mines, aka the Colony. The good news, however, is that in order to defeat these dragons, you need to get an artifact called the Eye of Innos. Innos being the god of fire and the patron of humanity. However, the paladins of King Robar II, after hearing of the fall of the barrier, sailed to the island with an elite force of 100 troops. They then took control of the city of Khorinis and also all of the holy artifacts, including the Eye of Innos. Worst of all, they are now actively hunting down all former convicts and dragging them back to the Valley of Mines to mine magic ore for the war against the orcs. And guess who needs to talk to the paladins in order to secure the Eye of Innos? But that's not all. One of your adversaries from the first game, whom you thought you killed, has returned. His name is Raven, and he was once an ore baron of the old camp, Gomez's right hand. Now he's fashioned himself as a servant of the dark god Beliar. He is currently scouring the ruins of an ancient temple in a forgotten part of the island. His goal? to obtain a dark artifact called the Claw of Belial. And guess who has to kill him? So, are you ready to begin your adventure? Now, this may seem like total doom and gloom, and like nothing you did in the first game actually matters. Wrong. Everything matters. Although there is no save game transfer, almost everything you did in Gothic 1 had some impact on the state of the world in Gothic 2. Every challenge that the hero now has to face is a result of what he did or didn't do in the colony. And this is glorious. Faced with these threats, the player's reaction is one of snarky acceptance. Alright, the world's gone down the shitter again. Time to clean up. And you know who else has this reaction? The nameless hero himself, renowned for his snarky attitude and sarcasm.
Can I retire now, or do you magicians have another skeleton in the closet which needs to be driven from this world?
Intentionally or not, Piranha Bytes did a great job of making sure the attitudes of the nameless hero and the player matched. This provides the feeling of both the player and the protagonist being eager for the continuation of their journey. With consequence. So, the story setup of Gothic 2 is a goldmine of lessons for making a proper sequel. First of all, if you're making a continuation of your franchise's story, do not set it in a place so far away, so disconnected from previous events, that all your players see are tired-faced NPCs. Don't reduce the impact of the protagonist's decisions in the previous story to a "oh yeah, that happened" comment from some random stranger in the world. And for the love of God, do not make the defining plot element of your previous story and its effects a joke in your future stories. If possible, have a save file import/editor for your game. If not, then try to show the effects of the previous game's story through visible changes and obstacles in the world. Have the player's obstacles in the second game be partially or completely caused by the actions they took in the previous game. In the case of a book or TV series, try and set the sequel story in the direct aftermath of your previous story. Have the protagonist of the second story deal with the problems caused by the first story's protagonist. You can have both the setting and the protagonist of the second story in a completely different location. However, make sure they are hounded by the consequences of the decisions they made in the past, ideally with flashbacks to the old setting and its current state. If you watched my first video or are just aware of the story setup for Gothic 1, you'll know that during the events of the game there is an ongoing war between the human kingdom of Murtana and the savage orcish hordes. I praised this as a fantastic ongoing background event that spiced up the story and kept the players invested in the world's lore. It seems that the developers at Piranha Bytes were also aware of the advantage their OB gave them and decided to expand upon it in the sequel. Early in the game, you are made aware of the looming orcish threat. Just like with their power curve, the developers took a gradual approach to revealing this threat, instead of pushing it in your face. Farmers, town guards, and city dwellers all have some comment on the growing orcish threat. One farmer tells you how he thought he saw an orc scout looking at him before disappearing into the darkness of the nearby woods. A city guard claims to have wounded an orc scout by shooting him with a crossbow from atop the city walls. The wounded orc supposedly crawled into the woods and disappeared. As the game progresses and you get more powerful and influential, you can talk with more important figures, from whom you learn more about the war on the mainland. One of the best examples of this, and where I think Gothic 2's OB really peaks, is this conversation with a dragon hunter named Pharos. Have a listen.
Where do you come from?
From the mainland. My people and I fled here. The situation there is getting worse. The orcs leave nothing but burned out villages behind. The king has lost control of his realm.
What else do you know about the war?
The orcs are outside the capital. But whether it's fallen yet, I don't know. The last thing I heard was that the king is dead. But I don't believe that.
Such a small interaction, and yet it does so much to expand the ongoing background event that is the Orcish War. The fact that the voice actor's delivery is superb also helps to sell the seriousness of the situation. There is also another thing that Gothic 2 does that is just icing on the cake for the OB, but I'll cover that in the gameplay lesson section. I think the lessons about Aube expansion from Gothic 2 are pretty universal for both game designers and storytellers in other mediums. When making a sequel to your original story that had a strong ongoing background event, make sure that the growing impact of said event is gradual. It can be in hushed whispers in taverns, or even as an open state of emergency declared by the town crier. It can be learned from frightened farmers or experienced veterans. Another way to show this impact without direct dialogue is through scenery. A trail of blood, a foreboding wall in the distance, discarded weaponry of strange origin, whatever helps tickle the audience's imagination. Whichever tool you choose, your goal is to create the feeling of something going down, something the protagonist can't control. Your audience should ideally get the impression that whatever background event they heard about in your previous story is slowly taking center stage, and they will be there when it does. While exploring the harbor city of Khorinis, the nameless hero hears rumors of people disappearing in the dead of night. No one knows where they disappeared, and fear and superstition reign among the populace. A water mage named Vatras asks you to investigate these disappearances, with the aid of a mysterious faction called the Ring of Water. With the threat of orcs and bandits rising in the countryside, what kind of new evil has taken root within the city walls, and beyond?
And how are the sheep?
The sheep eat and get fatter and fatter. Just like my wife.
Apart from the rising orcish threat, the second Aube of Gothic 2 comes with its glorious expansion, The Night of the Raven. It concerns the mysterious disappearances of people not just within the city, but across the whole island. It is true that having one Aube to enrich your setting is good, but having two is better. If you add a second ongoing background event, ideally one more on the mysterious side, to your game or book, you have a huge advantage over stories with just one Aube. This new layer adds depth and intrigue to your world. If the first Aube fails to capture your audience's attention, the second one just might. A nice bonus is that it also makes your world and story feel more realistic. As in the real world, in times of turmoil, there are always multiple events going on in the background, changing the course of history. So if you have the skill, try your hand at multiple Aubes, but be careful not to confuse your audience. If you watched my Lessons from Gaming Gothic 1 video, you'll remember how I praised the reactive world of the colony. How the NPCs would react to the choices you made, whether good or bad, and you'd see the consequences of those choices play out. However, you'll also remember that I criticized how this reactivity of the world dries up by the end of the game. The impact of the decisions you made is greatly weakened so that the story can reach its conclusion. I am very glad to say, however, that Gothic 2 solved this issue in a marvelous way. The developers did this by upgrading their reactive world to an evolving world. Let me explain what I mean. In the story and setting section, I already mentioned how the story setup of the first chapter implies that several threats are encroaching upon the island of Khorinis. The orcish threat, the bandits in the countryside, and the army of darkness in the Valley of Mines are all mentioned or hinted at in some way or another. However, all this story setup would mean little if the world did not reflect the writing. Fortunately, Gothic 2 masterfully blends the writing of the story with the gameplay of its world. In the first chapter, as you explore the world, you'll find only small signs of the things to come. An orc scout deep in the woods, keeping watch on the roads in and out of the city. Bandits blockading bridges and taking over buildings. Undead rising in abandoned cemeteries. The best part of all? You're nowhere near strong enough to take on these threats. So, just like a lot of the citizens of the island, all you can do is observe and take notes. Delayed gratification. Later, at the beginning of chapter 3, after getting stronger, gaining more influence, and getting more comfortable with the island's countryside, you encounter
Surrender while you can. There is no escape for you.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me. Come here, you Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, get the fuck. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
There he is.
Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. The Seekers. Powerful dark magicians with the ability to corrupt your mind to the point you can't even sleep. Twisted servants of the dark god Belial, now spread across the Khorinis countryside, readying the terrain for the arrival of the Umbral legions. And now you have to fight them, not in some small story-designated area, but almost everywhere. On the farms, in the fields, on the roads, and near the city itself. The Seekers are a constant threat. The only areas free of them are the city of Khorinis, the Fire Monastery, and a mostly forgotten region of the island. Now, every place you visited, every area you thought you knew, is a potential death trap. The sense of comfort and complacency you gain in the first 2 chapters goes out the window. A new layer of gameplay emerges just from adding a few NPCs to the world. Glorious. But that is not the final stage of the evolving world. The best is yet to come. Remember the dialogue with Pharos that helps the main Obe of Gothic 2 peak? Well, not long after that conversation you enter chapter 5 of the story. Here the story setup and gameplay changes work together to bring Gothic 2's evolving world to its peak. While the story setup begins with the rumors of the Orcish threat, the gameplay finishes by showing their arrival. Orc war bands led by elite warriors have now arrived on the island and taken key positions in the countryside. Most likely they are hoping to further cripple the island's supply chains and prepare it for the arrival of their main invasion force. Just like that, the ongoing background event mentioned by Pharos has arrived on the shores of Khorinis. Not with the same intensity, but just enough for you to feel the escalation of the dire situation, thus further immersing yourself in the lore and story. But that's not all. Soldiers from the Army of Darkness have spilled out from the Valley of Mines, making the dark caves of the island their home. In these caves they've hidden the dark progeny of their evil masters, the Dragon Eggs. But that's not all. Remember how I said that the Seekers can corrupt your mind until you can't even sleep? Yeah, that is a prelude to possession. In this state, an individual, driven to near insanity by a lack of sleep, will be slowly made to serve the enemy. So, the enemy has attacked on 3 fronts, with the Orcish warbands, by implanting dragon eggs in the countryside, and by possessing people across the island. Why is this relevant? Because unlike in Gothic 1, where the choice of faction becomes almost irrelevant by the end, in Gothic 2 the choice of faction unlocks 3 unique quest chains, 1 for each faction. The Paladins deal with the Orc bands, the Dragon Hunters track down the dragon eggs, and the Fire Mages deal with the possession epidemic spreading across the island. Since you can only join 1 faction per playthrough, I don't have to tell you what this does for the replay value, and making the player feel like their choices actually matter. So let's sum this all up. By upgrading their reactive world to an evolving one, the team at Piranhabytes not only fixed the lack of choices seen in the latter half of Gothic 1, but also created a living, breathing world with 3 distinct stages of evolution. It is because of these stages that Gothic 2 is such a replayable gem. The journey through these stages is something I have not experienced in any other game to this day. If there is another game that has this kind of journey, please recommend it to me in the comments below. I'll gladly provide you with some tobacco in exchange for this information. My tobacco supplier is a really solid guy.
My name is Abu Jin ibn Jadir ibn Omar Khalid bin Haji al-Sharidi. I am a seer and a prophet, an astrologer and a purveyor of tobacco.
Now, what lessons can be learned from Gothic 2's evolving world? Well, there are many, but I'll try and cover the most important ones. The good news is that the main lesson is pretty universal whether you're a game designer or a storyteller in another medium. Exercise restraint. Give your world or story the slow burn effect it needs to stick in the minds of your audience as a fantastic journey. Mention all the cool plot elements you came up with, but keep them in the background for a while. Let your audience first experience your world without the effects of your villain or some other threatening force. Then, bit by bit, show the impact of your ongoing background events as they slowly leave the background. Create at least 3 different stages for your world or story, each stage raising the stakes slightly while still allowing your audience to take in the change they see before their eyes. Take your audience on a journey from rumor
I could have sworn I saw an orc over there on the edge of the woods 2 days ago. Since then, I've kept at least one eye open at night.
to glorious action. I'd also like to be more specific on how to apply these lessons to different mediums. If you're a storyteller working within the medium of books, TV series or movies, here's how you can apply the evolving world lesson to your setting. Try to make use of multiple point of view characters. One character perspective for each stage of the evolving world will give your audience that sense of an escalating situation. You can use subtle foreshadowing through descriptions and dialogue to imply the existence of a background force that is slowly changing the world. If you're vague enough in your description of what's to come, you'll create fertile ground for audience debate. This in turn will drive audience engagement through the roof, and their appreciation for the final stage of escalation in your story. If you're a game designer, it seems simple, right? Just add a bunch of new NPCs to the world every now and then, and voila, an evolving world. However, that's only part of the equation. First of all, you need to properly set up the arrival of these NPCs. This can be done through environmental storytelling, NPC rumors, and a strong ongoing background event. Then you have to fine-tune the rate at which these NPCs spawn. Don't do it all at once and ruin the slow burn. Try, for example, to time the appearance of a new group of enemy NPCs after the player is warned of the enemy's progress in the world. Finally, give the enemy more than one way in which they affect the world. In other words, give the player at least 3 different problems. Then, based on the faction/gameplay style they chose, give them a unique questline to solve one of these 3 problems. Only then do you introduce all these new powerful NPCs, each related to one of the faction questlines. This ensures the players will be able to explore the final stage of the world in 3 unique ways. The replay value and memorability of your game will go through the roof. Whew. That was a lot to cover, but ultimately quite worth it in the end. If there's one thing a good sequel does, it's acknowledging the impact of the original story, or in the case of video games, the player's decisions. Gothic 2 Gold Edition is a game from the early 2000s, and save importing was not really a thing at the time. But the team at Piranha Bytes would do something equally good, if not better. They allowed you, the player, the nameless hero, to return to the Valley of Mines, aka the Colony. On your first playthrough, you might think it's just a nostalgia trip, where the developers expect you to use your knowledge of the Colony from Gothic 1. In truth, it is that, and yet so much more. When you first hear you are going back to the Valley of Mines, you're flooded with a sense of excitement and nostalgia. You get to visit all the places of your first adventure, in which you took down the magic barrier. However, the first sign that something might not be right is when you talk to the 2 knights guarding the entrance to the Valley of Mines.
Are you sure you want to go in there? I'm afraid you won't get very far. The orcs are on the other side.
If there's a way into the Valley of Mines, I shall find it.
Good, then go. Go within us.
The orcs are here. Damn, maybe there's another path. Oh yeah, Innas be praised, let's go. Using the tunnels of the abandoned mine, you find a way to avoid the orcs at the pass and enter the valley. It is always nighttime when you first enter, and I fully believe this is intentional. You recognize the old path to the exchange, but something seems different. It's too dark to make out what it is, and even a torch is of little help. Still, you know the area well, and you head down towards the valley. And then... So those are... But they couldn't have. You climb up to your old vantage point, and then you see it. The new Valley of Mines. The valley was never a verdant landscape, but now, blackened trees, scorched earth, ashes. Was it just the dragons who did this? Partially yes, but it is also implied that your destruction of the barrier caused a lot of damage to the land. In the far distance you see the outline of an orc army, besieging the castle that was once the heart of the old camp. You make your way down into the valley and you meet a man called Yergan. From him you learn the current state of the entire valley.
If you want to live, go back to wherever you came from. The Greenhides have laid siege to the castle for weeks now. And those dragons are hiding out somewhere too. The entire Valley of Mines is teeming with orcs. No matter where you're headed, this won't be a picnic.
The dragons, along with the Army of Darkness, have made the western regions of the Valley of Mines their home, literally terraforming the land with their presence. Tribes of orcs hiding in the mountains to the south pour down into the valley and engage King Robar II's troops. At the same time, orc reinforcements from the mainland arrived on the eastern coast. Together with the mountain orcs, they push back the royal troops to the old camp's castle, marking the beginning of a long and hard siege. This was catastrophic for the royal expedition's mission of regaining control of the valley in order to continue the mining of the magic ore for the war effort. Because of the siege, they were effectively cut off from their mining teams. Furthermore, this creates a problem for you, the nameless hero, as you have to get inside the castle and get a report on the situation. Fortunately, for a simple favor, Yergan tells you how to get inside the castle by sneaking around the orcs and using an abandoned siege ramp. I cannot express how much I love this part of Gothic 2 and the myriad of things it does for the player. It takes you on a nostalgic trip to the place of your first adventure, a place that is now very much not like you remember it. This only adds to the evolving world advantage of Gothic 2. It recognizes your actions in the first game by showing their indirect results in every place that you visit in the Valley of Mines. The glorious power curve of the Gothic franchise is also highlighted here. Taking on the orcs or most of the enemies during this story chapter is suicide. You are forced to delay your gratification in murdering these bastards and instead go around them. Not only is this wonderful for immersion, but it also adds a good amount of tension during this chapter. The Valley of Mines, a place you once knew so well, is now an alien, hostile region, with new threats waiting to slaughter you around every corner. However, the biggest benefit for me when it comes to this chapter is that this is your first contact with the main ongoing background event of the Gothic franchise, the war with the orcs. It is no longer a piece of background lore from the intro cinematic, alluded to in rumors from NPCs, but it is finally here. What you are seeing in the old Valley of Mines is the formation of the Khorinis front in this great war. To be present during such a crucial moment in Gothic history feels glorious to me. Hence why I tend to prolong the second and fourth chapters as much as possible. So, what lessons can we take away from Gothic 2's Coming Home to Consequences chapter? Well, for one, whether you're a game designer or a storyteller in another medium, nostalgia is a powerful tool for your audience. Allowing them to return to a place they once visited, either as a game level or a chapter, can be immensely rewarding. Bear in mind, however, this does not mean that just recycling levels and scenes is okay. There has to be something different to acknowledge the events of the previous story. I know this can be difficult as a game developer, especially if you are limited with time and resources. However, if you take the time to at least make some minimal changes in the environment, NPCs, and even music, your players will greatly appreciate the effort. Another great way to recognize player choice and immerse them in the world is by turning a place that was once safe into a death trap. This new gameplay layer, combined with some minimal changes, will do wonders for immersion and nostalgia. The same principle can apply to movie or TV series writers. The only difference is that, unlike in games, you determine the amount of time the audience will spend in their old nostalgic zone. My advice? At least one episode of proper, nostalgic tribute should be enough. Great news for the novelists, you've got no limitation but your imagination. If you remember, in the Evolving World section, I suggested using multiple POV characters, one for each stage of the world's evolution. The same principle can be applied here. Have a different character visit the setting of your previous adventure. Have this new character stumble on the leftovers from the previous protagonist. Maybe they are walking through the ruins of a city that was destroyed in the previous story. Maybe the land itself was changed due to some disaster, but there is still enough left to recognize the old setting. Best of all, perhaps as a result of the previous story, a new otherworldly enemy has taken residence in the old setting. You can also have the hero of the first story visit the site of their previous adventure. If you choose this option, I would advise a gradual nostalgia tour of the old places of importance. This is a very good approach if your readers had a lot of theories on the fate of the old setting, and now you get to reward their curiosity. Final universal lesson from this section. Have the OB of your game, book, or TV series slowly enter the spotlight during the nostalgia section. It is a wonderful way to properly subvert expectations. The objective is to get your audience to go from, "Oh man, this place has changed," to, "Oh my god, that background thing that was implied is now happening, and it's happening here." If you do this properly, the audience's expectations will be subverted, their emotions engaged, and their loyalty to you and your work secured. And that does it for the lessons from Gothic 2's gameplay. Let's move on to the final section and then wrap this up. I'm really happy to say that for the most part, the team at Piranha Bytes fixed and even improved on all the shortcomings from the first game. Roleplay options dwindling by the end of the game, here's 3 unique questlines for 3 different classes. Oh, and they last throughout the entire game, and combine wonderfully with the evolving world. Not enough world lore? No problem. Apart from more lore books scattered throughout the world, you also learn more about the world through the main quest, the faction quests, and the DLC. The lack of backstories and personal quests for the side characters is sadly still an issue, but to be fair, it's a less noticeable one in Gothic 2. Small quests like helping Buzz Gorn out of jail, retrieving Diego's money, or furthering Lee's goals for revenge all help give more character to your companions. If you want to see the lessons on flashing out your supporting characters, feel free to check out my Gothic 1 video. Gothic 2 has one of the best final battle preparation sequences in gaming. The stronghold of the game's antagonist is on a small island not far from Khorinis. So you go around the island calling in favors and gathering your own crew. This sequence also combines wonderfully with the final stage of Gothic 2's evolving world. The orcish threat is now clearly present on the island, and you and your crew will be leaving just before all hell breaks loose. That wonderful immersive feeling of something's going down and we gotta go is present in the entire 5th chapter of the game. It is a shame then that almost all of your companions are completely underutilized in the final stretch of the game. Sure, they offer their comments on the situation, which is great, some even offer useful advice, but most just stay on the ship while you do the heavy lifting in the final battle. On that note, the final location and dungeon of Gothic 2, the Halls of Irdurath, pale in comparison to the underground temple of the first game. It has the right ambience and even some interesting lore, but it is extremely linear and lacks that occult feeling that really makes Gothic what it is. The main antagonists of the second game are a bit generic compared to the mysterious demonic entity from the first game. Like I mentioned, the occult elements are a vital part of Gothic's identity formula. One word I would not use to describe dragons is occult, hence why they don't really fit the Gothic formula. I think the team at Piranha Bytes would agree with me, since their original concept for a sequel to Gothic 1 was much more thematically fitting to the Gothic universe. You see, in the cancelled Gothic sequel, the veil between the mortal world and the world of the demons has been damaged. As a result, demons began pouring out and possessing people. The nameless hero would have to stop them, or maybe even go over to their world. Now that is a much more interesting premise and fits the lore of the Gothic world far better than dragons, I guess. Also, a secret demonic invasion as a secondary ongoing background event to the Orcish War? Yes please. Although to be fair, the team at Piranha Bytes did their best to implement them into the world's lore, and they don't feel like a huge lore-breaking addition. They just kinda feel out of place when you understand what makes Gothic special. My best guess is that Piranha Bytes scrapped their original concept because dragons were more commercially friendly. In full transparency, I am being a hypocrite by bashing the dragons, considering my favorite faction is the Dragon Hunters. I love their aesthetic, I love their weaponry, and I love their faction quests. However, if they were Demon Hunters, I would have loved them even more. Why? Because then they'd be both cool looking and more fitting for the world lore. Again, I think the team at Piranha Bytes would agree with me, since the Dragon Hunter's aesthetics are actually based on the scrapped Demon Hunter faction from the cancelled Gothic sequel. So what are the lessons of Gothic 2's thankfully much smaller failures? There are some pretty universal lessons for both games and other storytelling mediums. If you've already introduced a cast of interesting and fun side characters that help your protagonist along the way, make sure they are there for the final stretch as well. Let them have a role in the final battle to take down the big bad. If for some reason you can't do that, at least make sure they are physically present and helpful up to the point of the final confrontation. It's always good to make the audience feel like they're not alone, whether it's a game, book, or TV series. Also, if you've done the work of building up the final location of the story as a unique, exciting, and mysterious stage for the final battle, make sure it lives up to that when the audience finally arrives. Make sure the place is filled with lore and revelations that can be found elsewhere in the world. Make it sufficiently non-linear, just enough for the audience to feel a little bit lost, as this does wonders for memorability and immersion. If you can, try to use the environment of the final location to tell its story. As you may recall, I said in my first video that debates about the lore and story are the lifeblood of a franchise. If you can make your final location start such a debate among your fans, you've done something really good. Finally, if you're making a sequel to your story, thematic consistency should be one of your top priorities. If your original story was successful enough to warrant a sequel, you might be tempted to add whatever is popular at the moment just to make sure it's bigger and more successful. Don't, just please no. What you need to do first is identify what makes your original work special and loved by your audience. Ideally, create a formula for your franchise. Once you've got that down, make sure that your sequel is faithful to that formula and actually builds upon it. You can break away from the formula, but make sure you do not compromise the identity of your franchise. It may seem prudent to add whatever is popular at the moment to give your franchise a temporary boost in popularity. However, in the long run, you will be disappointed by the loss of your franchise's identity. Popularity does not always equal quality or long-term memorability. By sticking to the formula of your franchise, you may suffer a temporary drop in popularity, but in the long run, you will have gained a larger and more loyal audience. It has been over 20 years since the release of Gothic 1 and Gothic 2, and because those games preserved the identity of the Gothic franchise, their fanbase is still growing strong. They are considered cult classics, ones that are still increasing in popularity. So much so, in fact, that a remake of the first game is on the way. Hopefully a good one that applies all the lessons of the past and reinvigorates the franchise. To put it simply, it is much better to preserve the identity of your franchise even if you are sacrificing momentary popularity. That way, in the long run, your work will be remembered as a timeless classic that will be enjoyed long after you're gone. Sacrificing the soul of your franchise to appease the popular trends of the time will only alienate your loyal audience, and forever taint your story as a sad case of what could have been. So those are the many lessons of Gothic 2, from both its highs and lows, with the former thankfully being more abundant than the latter. Please only play Gothic 2 Gold Edition, which includes the Night of the Raven expansion. Playing Gothic 2 without Night of the Raven is like eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the peanut butter. It is like living in the Balkans and not hating your neighbors. Whether you're a game designer or a creator for some other medium, I'm sure that if you apply at least some of the lessons from this video, your franchise will receive a boost in quality and audience loyalty. For those struggling to make a superior sequel to their original work, I can comfortably recommend Gothic 2 as a good guide on how to do it properly. However, even if each creator who saw this video applied all the lessons to the letter, it would mean nothing without you, the audience. As I said in my previous video, far more people who are not creators but rather fans of different storytelling mediums will watch this video. These lessons are just as important for them as they are for the creators. If you can't spot the franchises that apply these lessons and stand behind them, then the battle for quality entertainment is lost before it even begins. So for the wonderful fans in gaming and other mediums, I have a humble request. Identify, appreciate, and support the creators trying to make a difference, especially if they're applying these lessons. Identify when a sequel has a proper continuation with consequences. Appreciate a franchise with an evolving world. And finally, support the creators who preserve and nurture the souls of their franchises. It is the time and money of the fans that shape the landscape of entertainment. I truly believe that when enough people learn the lessons that gaming has to offer, the landscape will change for the better. And so will we. And that marks the end of our journey through the wonderful world of Gothic 1 and Gothic 2. As we all know, there were no games released after Gothic 2 which turned out to be abominations that defiled the soul of the franchise. Next time we'll be visiting a more well-known setting, which also has some valuable lessons for all of us. Thank you for taking the time to visit me here. I appreciate you making the climb, it must have been difficult. Feel free to like and subscribe to support the upkeep of this place, and I'll see you next time, in the temple.